you may be in a season. Winning for you is just literally showing up because you're in so much emotional pain. That's the win. A lot of times we miss the season we're in because we're always looking to the next season because we think the next season is going to give us greater relief.
It felt like a pocket of peace in the middle of a war zone. Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules podcast. It's your girl, Bri, and I am here with Mr. Crawford himself. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. You know, our producer Lauren back there is hot with me because I was 45 minutes late, but I was actually trying. I was trying to, handle some business and take care of something, but that's my fault. I can own my mistakes, and so I'm sorry, Lauren. Please forgive me. But besides that, actually, I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing well. We just did a fun little staff retreat.
It was. Bri, you said something great today in our check-in. You said that you loved it because normally you don't get to, we do a lot of events, for our clients and host other people, but you actually got to do that for our actual staff, people So why was that important? Why did that mean so much to you?
I think it was very special because, especially the weekend that it fell on, a lot of our staff was out doing other events just within the community. So it was really cool where it's like, while everybody else is out there, serving other people, I got to just kind of, for hours, plan on things that are going to serve them. I think it's just cool every now and then to express gratitude towards the people that you love. We spend a lot of time expressing gratitude and helping develop strangers. They don't stay strangers from the beginning. Whenever we pull off a lot of the event aspects of things, they are. So it was cool just to host, people that we love and care about who are usually hosting others.
I have a question because one of the things that you did was that everyone had kind of a superhero character. And then there was actually there was really a story behind it, why those people. So what made you go with that, to do that for everyone?
Honestly, because it, was the easiest, yet the most thoughtful gift to do. Easy in the terms of we went to Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, took a look at the Funko Pops,
yep.
And just went off pure vibes, straight intuition. We didn't have a list of who we were going to give to who. We had, literally no idea, and just kind of stood there for an hour and this person would work for this person would work for this person.
Yep.
But the thoughtful parts of it, which is actually writing the letter, I made this joke. I was like, I was in my Paul bag. Writing letters to people on staff. Yep. But that took 8+ hours at least, just to write really thoughtful things about everyone, kind of why we got them that character, what we think that it spoke about, where they currently are, where it is that they're going to be in the future. And that was my favorite part. I don't do our creative writing and things like that. So I have a new appreciation for those that do support what we do in that way, because I was tired. Yeah. That was draining.
Yeah, creative writing is a very hard thing, especially because every word matters, the complexity of those words. But you guys did a great job. It was phenomenal. Like I got Nick Fury. I never thought about Nick Fury in that type of way. But when you wrote out the description, oh my gosh, 100%, that was it. So that part was really, really cool. And I loved it because, again, these are ways, that you actually do build great culture. We're constantly telling, clients, and I'm working with people culture is king. Culture is the oxygen you breathe. And you build culture by doing moments like this, because, again, these are moments that will go a long way for people. It was great because there was no in between dead time. There was very much so there's room to flex and move, but also it was very much so planned, thought out, and everything like that. And so, it was just done. It was phenomenal. You guys did a great job with it. So I think everybody who was there appreciated it. And I think it's one of those things to where, we'll do it almost every, we'll probably do it every year now.
This is our first year doing it. Yeah. Usually we do what we'd call strategic planning.
Yep.
So we get together before the year starts and we do a lot of KPI brainstorming, creative brainstorming, things like that. But we've done a pretty good job about implementing, those kind of rhythms within our daily, monthly structure with everyone. So we're how are we going to do the offsite that we usually do. And I'm glad we went with the retreat. It was something different, and I think we'll repeat it.
It is. I remember seeing, I think it was somebody, maybe up in, I think maybe Mark Batterson in D.C., that they used to have something like that I saw years ago where it wasn't strategic planning. It was just they would just go, and it was a time for them as a staff to just connect. And so I was like, man, one day I want to do that. But, you know, a lot of times because there's like three or four different organizations running underneath the roof that what we have, we're just constantly doing stuff. But I think we've done a great job, and you've done a great job with the team of actually building out like those rhythms you said. So now it allows us to go do that because now we already have those strategic planning sessions, KPI sessions, all the stuff that you have to do to actually run, you know, a successful organization. We're able to do that in the normal rhythms and stuff like that, which then gives us away from everything to do that. So that was actually awesome. So, yep, glad we did it.
JT, someone on our team, made a comment whenever we were there about how it felt like a pocket of peace in the middle of a war zone. Mm-hmm. And I, you know, leading up to it, I was really nervous. Like, and I mean, I even had a few meetings with you where I'm like, okay, do you see that we're literally not doing, like, you know, anything that is strategic or brainstorming anything like that? Are we sure that we're good with that? Just because of where we're at right now, it's just like we are rocking and rolling. Yeah. Things are popping off in a way that's really good, but it's exciting, but it also has that intensity and almost that like you know, like fear, like in a good way, where it's like, oh, we're finally hitting the point where we're doing the stuff that we've dreamed about doing. Like, are we going to show up? Yep. And so it would have been really easy for us to say, like, all right, no, everyone, like, we have a lot of opportunities coming up. We have a lot of things we need to, you know, focus on and get out there. So we're not going to do this. But I'm really glad that we committed to it. Yeah.
And it's a prime example. If you're out there, if you're leading a team and, man, maybe you only have 2 people on your team or 3 people, whatever, I would encourage you, go do it. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be, I mean, at the level and size of what we did, but I would just go do something like that. Get it into the rhythms of your organization from the jump, because it does really build great things. And here's why, is because when you're in those environments, you get to hear, and especially the questions we ask, the things we do, you get to hear people's stories and you get to know them, which, again, the more you know someone, the more you're allowed to then, again, be able to help lead them, relate with them in more of an authentic way. It helps build authentic culture. You know, like Lauren's new in our team here, and, you know, getting to hear a lot more of like her story, her hearing a lot more other people in the team, it actually was a very, very helpful thing. And it's, you know, those things kind of connect you, you know, at a greater measure. So I think, man, if you're out there doing it, make sure you just get it in your rhythm and get it done.
Yeah. And Lauren has insane lore. So insane backstories. Yes. If you don't know what lore means, backstories. And so getting to know her is just such a joy because it's absolutely hilarious.
Freaking like she's like Carmen Sandiego. Like, you know what I'm saying?
No,
like,
that's actually so
it's
true.
literally Carmen Sandiego. It's like, dude, like, she was like a, you know what I'm saying? She's
Wait,
like
when
this,
you were where?
Yeah, you were where?
Doing what?
I was in Madagascar and I was helping somebody steal a vase out of a, like, what happened? When I was 9. You're like, dang. Okay. You're like, all right, cool story. You know, I've been to the Vatican. You're like, oh, okay, like, great. You're like, how was that? So, but no, it was really cool.
Funny.
It's
okay,
cool.
well,
let's dive in today, Bri. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, well, I mean, earlier we were talking a little bit about where we're at as a company, getting a little bit into seasons. So today we're going to talk about seasons. We talked about doing something a little bit new, where we start off every episode with talking about the origin story of the topic. So why don't you tell us about that? Yeah,
this origin of this kind of started for me. I mean, it's been something I've thought about for like years, but like it was really fresh on my mind when I just went to Jackson Hole with my friends. You know, we do a guys trip every year, and we were there, and probably a week before I started like looking at the weather, and I was like, you know, I knew it was going to be like not like Florida, but as I started looking at the weather, it was like, you know, as a week out, I'm like, it's like, oh, potentially Monday, it's gonna like we get to like it's gonna snow. I'm like, dude, it's May. There was like, you know, so there was nothing, but as I'm mentally packing, I was like, okay, you know, maybe a little cool, whatever, but nothing like that. So it's like not understanding one, like the seasons are a little bit different there than they actually are here. But other thing was interesting is that, you know, you're between like, you know, the Grand Tetons, you're there. Well, come to find out, I can't remember the exact dates, but it's like, I think like male bears, like grizzly bears, they come out of hibernation around like March. And then on the other side of it, I think females come out like in April. So we're up there like at the end of like, you know, April. And I'm just like, and I didn't know that, you know, so we're just up there just kind of walking around, hiking, no bear spray, just out there on just vibes, right? Another thing is, and so that's another thing, like being up there. And after I came back, I'm like, hold up. Yeah, I definitely would have took some bear spray with me, knowing that these jokers just got out of hibernation and they're looking for anything to eat.
Which I didn't even know that bear spray was a thing.
Oh yeah, bear spray thing. It's crazy. There was a guy who's from Massachusetts a few weeks ago, or matter of fact, a week after we left, was hiking up there. And he went, again, 100% this dude was white. There's no way it was a brother. But because my man was hiking off the trail, doing all this stuff like that. And he goes up there, and there's a cub that comes running by him. Like, he sees a cub. So he's like, so he's trying to, he sees a cub. Normally, there's got to be a mom somewhere around. So, whenever you're around the cub, that mother's going to protect. So that big grizzly bear came and attacked him and bit him a couple times. But he was trying to pull the bear spray out, and it bit down, and they clamped down the bear spray and exploded. And that was the only thing. They got this bear spray, the bear ran off. It's the only way the guy survived was because of that wood. He would have got mauled out there. And so, like, being out there, I had no idea. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, yo, I'm going to maybe try to go over there, like, in January, December, when bears are hibernating and we're good, right? And another thing, like the last thing I'll say about seasons, what made me think about it, so one of my good friends was telling me, he's like, man, if we're going to go hiking, should I bring like snow boots or hiking boots, whatever? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Dude, it's freaking May. I mean, it may be cold or whatever, but it's not going to be snow and ice on the ground and all this crap. We get up there, I mean, there's freaking ice everywhere, slipping everywhere. Your boys in like some Kobe's out here trying to hike in the middle of nowhere. And the reason why I say all that, it made me think about the idea of like, how important it actually is to know what season you're in. And what does this mean for like leadership in life is I think most of the times people are constantly, you hear this statement of a work-life balance. I'm trying to get to this. There's this magical place. And I just don't believe in that. I believe what we have to become better at is we have to actually understand like seasons. You have to understand what seasons of life you're in. Just like going up there and realizing it was still snowing, going up there and it was, bears coming out of hibernation. You have to recognize the season, because when you recognize the season you're in, you prepare for it differently. And I think for all of us, we're all trying to find this season where we'll get this work-life balance. I don't think you're ever going to get a work-life balance. I love how Andy Stanley says it this way. You have to just always manage tension. But the way you really manage tension is understanding the season of actual life that you're in. Well, if it's family season, marital season, work season, whatever, you're always in different seasons of life. And I think being able to recognize those seasons are vital for your own well-being, your own mental health, and actually your productivity as a leader.
I have the luxury of kind of coming around a lot of the cultures that you've created since I was, 18, 19. And one of the first things, I don't know if I ever told you this, one of the first things that I remember you talking about was the importance of knowing how to manage the tension in life over expecting for there to be balance. And that, in hindsight, that as we're talking about right now, I'm like, oh, wow, that actually really altered, I think, the trajectory of my perspective, in the seasons that I've entered and the things that I've gone through. But what do you think are the things that hinder us from being aware of the season of life that we're in?
I think it's because, one, we don't define where there is. So, like, a lot of times we're always like, everybody, we always think the next part is going to be the best part, right? Or we're just once we get here. But if you ask somebody, okay, what is there? Is it like more money? How much money? Is it more time? How much time? Is it a certain job? What job? What type of title? What type of company? Is it family? Is it that all your kids are they're perfectly behaving? Like, does it mean that, you're out of the toddler phase and so you actually get some rest? What is there? And I think because we're so stressed out in the current place we're in, and I think we're so stressed out in the current place that we're in, we're always trying to get to the next place because we never define the current place. So because of that, we had unmet expectation, and we just always felt, man, if I just get to here, and we're always trying to get there, but we don't know what there is. And so I think a lot of times we miss the season we're in because we're always looking to the next season, because we think the next season is going to give us greater relief of the actual maybe pain that we're going through. And the truth is that it won't. It's like almost in every season you walk in, there are going to be the levels of pain and discomfort. That's just a part of being a human. But I think that's what ends up turning people upside down. They can never define what the next thing is. And we're always just out there in this kind of mythical place looking for it. And when you're in there, you're just trying to find, man, if I just get there, it's going to give me balance, it's going to give me whatever. But we never define what there is.
What are some signs that we might be somebody who's doing that?
I think if you're always thinking about like the future and your future, you always think it's going to be like, to pay attention to like, one, what do you think that's going to be like if I get here? And that could be like, and that could be where you're always thinking about, man, once my kids get like older. That could be, man, once I have a certain job title, once I'm out of kind of this, like, first, second year, I've been grinding. Once I get here, like, I think start to look at where are your frustrations, where are the places where you want relief in your life. And if you're constantly always looking for relief and not enjoying at all the season of life that you're in, I think that is a sign that you're not understanding or understanding your seasons that you're in. And I think that's one of many that I could go through.
So, one of the examples you use is someone who is thinking, whenever my kids get older. So, when my kids get older, I might have more time. Isn't there some level of truth behind that? So, like, is it the intention? How do you know if you're looking for relief, or if you are just saying, like, yeah, when my kids are older, I will have more time. Yeah. So I'm not able to do, this thing right now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that it's not that you shouldn't, like when you're, I use that example, when you're like, have like young kids, like you don't get a lot of sleep. So you're like, man, I can't wait till them get older so I can actually take a nap during the day and nobody's going to like die. You know what I'm saying? And so I think when it gets out of balance is when like, almost all the parts of your life, that may be one part of it. And you're like, no, when you evaluate, like, no, I am looking forward to being able to do this. But if almost every part of your life is always, you think almost every part's going to be better in the next season, that is a sign where I think you're not properly understanding the season of actual life that you're in. If almost every area of your life, you're always thinking, oh, when I get here, it's going to be better. Because here's the God honest truth. There have been parts of my life to where I look back on it and I'm like, dude, that was the best part. So like an example was like when I was doing basketball skill development as one of my companies. It was JT, who you mentioned earlier. It was his senior year, and JT went on to be one of the top scorers in the country. But it was me, him. It was me and him, and then there was two other guys. One was the NBA lottery pick, and another guy, actually, he's playing professional right now, just broke the scoring record in Russia. Well, they all were working out together. And then there were some other pros who come in. Now, during that time, I was always thinking about, man, if I had more of these guys, like more pro guys, more of this, man, when I get to this place, it's going to be better. I look back at that season, and dude, it was the funnest time I ever had training. But when I was in it, I never thought that. I mean, I had moments where I was like, man, this is amazing. But when I look back on it, I'm like, dude, I wish I would have embraced that moment more because it was amazing. I had one guy who's a former lottery pick who got hurt. And man, I really helped him, with all his hard work. I mean, he dropped like 45 pounds. Most people thought his career was over. Man, we got him back in great shape playing. I mean, he's still playing, almost 40 years old now, still playing basketball when they thought his career was going to be over with. And man, looking at that, and whenever I talk to him, he always says, he's like, man, that year with you was one of the most pivotal, significant years of my life. But when we were in it, we were just in it. And I look back on it, like, I wish I would have enjoyed it more because it was so much fun. It was so much fun being in a competitive environment, watching guys get better, watching them develop. And so that's what I would tell you. Like, man, sometimes you are in the best season of your life, or best season maybe of one area of your life right now. And that's the interesting thing, too, because you can be in a great season in one part of your life and not in the other part of your life, And so you can be great season relationally and not a great season work-wise, or vice versa.
What were the things whenever you were in that season that you were constantly focusing on in the future, that you were kind of grasping towards, that kept you from being present? Mm-hmm. And then the second question is, you say you wish that you would have embraced it, that you wish you have enjoyed it more. What does that mean? Does that mean you wish you were more present? Do you wish you would have structured your time differently? Yeah.
Let's go to the latter. Yeah, absolutely. I wish I would have been more present, meaning that when I was in there, I just would have been there. Man, watching all the nuances of what was going on. Remembering stories while we were there, enjoying it, actually having fun, laughing, smiling, not always, I think I would have done that a lot more. So it's more really being present, because I think what I was always thinking about in the future was about, man, what's my next decision? What's going to be next for the business? When am I, once I get I was always thinking about what the business could be. Oh man, once we get from, this dollar, this gross amount a year, we're going to get to here. Oh man, at that time I was like, we had just started, we were kind of leading the church as well. And I was like, man, once we get from here to, man, we get to this, whatever. And again, what's crazy, I didn't really have a number or a size of a church or a business to get here or my kid. I didn't have any of that stuff. It was just like always like, man, once I get there. Now, one thing I would say was like financially, that was one of the things. So we were building, Wendy was building her dance studio. I was, we were building this training thing, and you're like, man, once I get here financially, now I didn't have the number. It's like, but it's just more than what I had. Oh man, it'll give me a lot more relief. And here's the thing. I look back on that moment. I mean, this is what, like almost 9 years ago. Like, I'm at that place maybe I thought I would be, and here's what I realized. I'm like, no, I mean, it's great, but it still doesn't take away like what I thought it would take away. So I think if I was thinking about anything, it was about becoming more financially secure. If I was thinking about something that was going to give me relief, but a lot of times it was just like all these other things of size of things, whatever, but it was never really defined.
Mm. Can you tell a story about a time where your professional life was doing really well, but you personally weren't?
Right now. That I probably have had over, especially the last couple months, some of my biggest bouts of late with kind of, I think some level of like depression. I think the other side of it is like, man, it's a difficult season because like my son is like, he's graduated the other day. And so it's like, man, he's going to a new phase of his life. And it's like, as his father, I've been there from the beginning with Jay. And a lot of the ups and downs I've mentioned about him being on the spectrum and growing off of it. And man, him, he's got the privilege of going to Florida State. He's going to play basketball there and all this stuff. But I'm like, man, that's a lot because that's going to change, our dynamics. The fact that Wendy and I, for 10 years, man, all we've done is drop our head, build businesses and raise kids. And now we're at a place where our two oldest are getting ready. My daughter, Brooklyn, she's a junior. She's got a year left. I mean, me and Wendy were literally one day, we're like, oh my gosh, we're like, in about a year, it's just going to be Peyton at the house. And so here's the thing. You've been like, no one really prepares you as a husband and wife for that season because you've really just been working. And it's like, man, me and Wendy, we talk, we have a great relationship, but it is part of like, oh, like, what are we going to do now? Because like, it's been so invested in doing the stuff. And now you're like, okay, so what are we, like, how are we going to interact and whatever? And sometimes that can cause like relational friction as you're trying to figure it out. Life, again, as you get older, things start to change. Interests change as far as like what you thought you wanted to do or not want to do. So then that causes whatever. And then internally you're wrestling and changing again as well. Personally, man, again, 45 years old and realize I'm in a flow though. And I'll get back to professionally, but also I'm in a part where I'm like, man, like the next 20 years of my life is so important. And what I'm leaving in the earth that, meaning like some of the best work I believe is going to happen in the next 20 years. So that's another thing personally of like, you start to wrestle, do I have enough? Am I good enough? Am I whatever, am I going to fail? All these desires I've had, whatever. But professionally, there's a lot of incredible things happen. I mean, you look at it, just the clients we work with, the organizations that we run, things that we've had, like, we're launched about, not too long ago, our academy that we're doing through Equal Shot, which is, being able to help kids in rural areas get physical training, emotional training, mental health training, cognitive care, all this stuff to help them become better. Man, we're launching that. And that was a dream for almost 10 years to get something like this going. And now watching that start to happen. So professionally, things are going really, really well. Opportunities to work in the athletic space that I've always wanted to. And so anyway, that's going great. But then personally, it's there. And so, but it's a kind of difficult time, kind of manage that when you're going through it.
I think I have a practical example that I don't think that you would mind me sharing.
Oh, please do.
The other day when we were our first day at the staff retreat, that morning, you just had a...
Ooh.
You yes. and your middle just went absolutely in, from what I heard. And so I think that's a practical example of just how things played out personally. And then you showed up at the staff retreat and you're in a really down place. obviously you're a leader though. And so you walk into spaces like that. And as you're, driving from your house to the staff retreat, you have 30 minutes and you're thinking to yourself, like, how mad you are, all of the, existential fears with one of your daughters, and then probably stuff with Wendy, and then probably stuff with what you should or shouldn't have said. All these things are going through your mind while you're also simultaneously thinking about, like, and I have to lead. How am I going to show up whenever I get here? Like, do I need to fix my face? What am I going to say? Like, am I going to have 5 minutes in my room? I imagine you're thinking through all of those things. Yeah. By navigating those moments, how have you learned to kind of bridge the gap when those seasons aren't the same, and to still be able to show up well and present within those areas?
Yeah, I think one, it's being honest, one with yourself. I think in that moment, kind of what you're saying, there's kind of a moment like, with me in my middle, you know what I mean? Again, the thing about it is that, man, she just is a natural, there's this leadership that's there. So like I said, when you're a leader, then you always think you're right. And I think I'm right. And so that's going to cause tension, right? And she's getting to a phase in her life where she has opinions about things, which she should have those opinions about things. And there was things that she could have handled better. I should have handled better. But it's one of those things. So then when you go in there, you got to be honest. So I think one thing you have to do is you have to dump the box. You got to. So when I was there, I was just being very honest. As I was like, for me, I pray. Some people, you may talk it out, talk to somebody, whatever. But this is what I was processing, going through, as well. So I was able to kind of talk through some of that. And then once I got there, I needed time to myself. Because I was just like, and luckily we weren't starting right away, blah, blah, blah. I could have a few moments to myself in order to kind of get my thoughts and things right to be able to go in there. And then the other thing too is like, I think sometimes you just got to one of my good friends said this about me. He was like, because my emotions are a gift and a curse. But he's like, man, for so long, he's like, you always are trying to suppress those things because you want to show up right away. You don't want people to think you're just too volatile emotionally, whatever. He's like, but dude's like, it's what makes you who you are. He kept telling me, like, man, emotionally, go be you. He's like, dude, you've done all this work, whatever. And so there is a reality. I do wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I'm not going to get rid of that. And so here's the truth about it. It's a difference if I wear them and it's like, man, it sucks the oxygen out of the room. It's always killing rooms or whatever. No, but the truth is that, like, it's just who I am, and I've got to be willing to do that and to know that. And here's the thing, as I was able to still keep my feet moving, I don't stop, because I could have said, hey guys, listen, I lead the whole thing. So I say, hey, I ain't showing up until I'll see you guys like later this afternoon. You guys do the first part without me. But I think showing up and just keeping your feet moving, and I think for me, it's like being around everyone and just kind of being in that environment actually was able to help me lift kind of that mood in that process. But I'll tell you this, in that season, the way you balance, you got to talk. You got to be able to get out what's going on, your disappointments, your excitements, whatever. You got to be able to process that. That's journaling, that's praying, that's talking to somebody. So I was able to do that. And, Dr. Zoda, who's on our team, was there. And so me and Doc are, we're such good friends that, man, I was able to sit down and process some stuff with him. And it was actually pretty helpful. So I think that's kind of how you banish the tension of that. You got to actually talk through stuff.
Something that I noticed too is that, after we were probably about an hour or so in, we ended up doing, this was our only strategic thing. We did like an update. We kind of did, what are our wins? How are things tracking so far? Because we don't get to do that with one another often because, which I don't know that we've ever really explained this, but there are 3 entities under New Rules Collective, and not everybody works within all of them. Yep. And so getting to hear about what's going on is always really special. So we did one of those updates, maybe took like 20 minutes, and then something you said, that was one of those things that was kind of like wind beneath your wings for the rest of the staff retreat time. That made you have so much gratitude towards everything it is that we're accomplishing. Yep. So I can see a situation where maybe somebody else going through that, a little bit less practice on how to navigate the internal structures. Yep. That would be a validation of like, see, all I ever really need to do is work. Work is what brings me, the most value. Like there could be these other things that come from that. How do you manage the tension of that, especially in a season where work seems to be, or I guess we don't really like the term work as a traditional meaning, but your profession, purpose, that kind of thing. How do you navigate that whenever it might not be, or whenever it's seeming a little bit more glamorous per se than the personal?
Yeah, I think it's always, it's being able to keep it in proper perspective. So first, man, it's okay to celebrate it. Yeah, dude, like things are great. And that's what happened in that moment. Because, I mean, what hit me was like, man, I remember the seasons where it felt like I was in a desert with all these ideas and none of it happening. And now as I sat there, I'm like, man, like there are 3 different entities that I had the privilege of starting that all are moving, in a direction making real significant impact. And that's really, it's been over years, but I'm talking about very much so has gone to a different level over the last like year to 2. And seeing these things start to play out was like, man, that's amazing. I also think how you keep the balance is because you always know this. It's always, there's ebbs and flows to it. So you don't get too high because, man, there's going to be a season where it's not going to feel like that. And my personal life's going to feel high. And you also, what you allow it not to do is make your personal life situation feel like, oh man, it's the worst it's been. Because that's where I can go almost in anything I do is I'm very high, very low. So when something's down for me, it's the whole world. There's there's no hope. There's no whatever. When things are up, it's like, yeah, like I think it's the greatest thing. We're going to do this. It's going to be this. And there's nothing that can pull us down. And so what I've learned to try to do is to try to is to ride the wave. You know what I'm saying? Not let the wave take me too deep, but not let the wave take me too high. But I'm just learning how to ride it in the proper way.
And then how do you navigate your relationships, whether that be marriage or friendships or even with your children, whenever, maybe things are high for them or low for them, but it's opposite for you?
Yeah, it's great. I think it's being able to when I go into it, the same way I think I should go into every relationship is as an act of service. So that when, man, it may be for them, it may be a high moment for them. Man, act of service is like to encourage them, man, like to put gas in their tank. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, dude, this is incredible. Look at all your, remind them of all the hard work they did. Remind them of where they used to be. And man, you should celebrate this and da-da-da. And when they're low, do the same thing. Come in and use and say, I may be in a high moment, right? Because here's what it does. When you're in, and you're so opposite. So when I'm in a low moment, man, what can kind of help me lift out of that low moment is actually showing opposite of what I feel. So it's like, no, man, let me encourage, let me speak life into that person. And then when I'm in more, maybe in a high moment and that person's in a low moment, I take the fuel from my high moment and speak life into that person to remind them, hey, yep, you're here, but man, this is what you got coming forward. This is what you're putting the time in for. Hey, don't forget who you were. Don't forget like what you were a year ago. Don't forget like, man, a year ago, these things were here. And now you're just in that downward season for the next big jump. And so again, I think the way that I do it is always coming to a relationship with that heart of service to people, that my job is to serve them. And regardless of what they give to me, is to serve them. And I think when I do that, it always seems to be helpful for people. And it also helps me a lot as well.
I actually had a conversation with a close friend of maybe a few months ago where she's actually in a season of life that I was just previously in. Mm-hmm. So something that we talked about, especially on our last podcast drop. So she came to me and was like, I feel like, you don't like talk to me about, the really hard, like the deep, like just like super intense stuff.
Yep.
And I was like, I sat back for a second because the conversation was like, oh, is there a lack of trust? Mm-hmm. Like, do you feel like you can be yourself? Those kind of conversations. And for a split second, I was like, like, let me think about that. Let me think about why I might be doing that. And then I realized, I was like, oh, it's just because I'm not there anymore. Mm-hmm. And you are. So what our friendship looks like right now is for both of us to know how to make space for one another when we're in opposing seasons.
It's really,
which is sacrifice. Like that's part of relationship. That's a sacrifice. Because I can tell like when I'm excited, but she needs to talk about something that's just really hard. That costs me. Or whenever I'm really excited and she's in a place that's really hard, but she's trying to be present, like within, my excitement. That's a sacrifice for her.
No, and that is good. That's good for friendships and relationships. You can't. I mean, I've had some relationships like that where you're like in a great season and things are going great. But like, you got somebody or a couple people in the group chat that things aren't going great. So you got the other group chat that you start saying, hey man, like I'm, where you get all your celebrations there because you don't want to make the person feel bad. But I also realized like, nah, man, that's not like, if it's a real good friendship relationship, no, like we got to be mature enough to be like, yo, like, man, we got to celebrate. Like, celebrate when you do well, celebrate when I do well. This is what we do, because that's the thing. We're not competing against each other. It's not that I'm saying or that person's saying they're better than me. And honestly, if we do that, I think it gets us out of different seasons even more.
Whenever you are going through different seasons of life, how do you nurture the same amount of discipline and innovation that's needed to be able to run, multiple businesses?
This is a great question. I think for me, again, all I can do is speak for me. Like I said, I have highs, very high highs, low lows. So when I have to learn how to ride the wave, meaning that like I've got to, when there's like a creative, like kind of like I start to feel that creative thing going, I got to ride it. Like I just got to go, because I know that's not going to last forever, which that's when I'm like in a low season. So that may mean where I'll call like Wendy and say, hey, I'm kind of like, I'm kind of in a flow of certain things. So do you mind if I stay out a little bit later? Because I'm going to go, I need to kind of keep doing this or whatever. I also think when I'm like in a lower time, I don't try to force it. And so that's kind of one thing. But I think the other thing too is actually the discipline of this. So like it's knowing yourself and how you actually operate. I operate in themes. I don't operate like in, some people are very structured of like, man, hey, from 9:30 to 10 o'clock, I am, 9:30, 10. I am, I've got this, emails I'm returning from 10 to 11. I'm doing, strategic, I'm working on this project from, whatever. For me, I work in themes. So like Tuesdays, like for today, like my main theme for today is all like speaking content that I have to do, and so normally that is anywhere between, and, I normally kind of speak, whether it's through podcasting, communicating on a Sunday, working with companies, whatever. I'm going to probably communicate sometimes upwards of like 5 or 6 times a week. And sometimes that could be 3 different like pieces of content that I have to do there. So I try to spend a lot of my Tuesdays. So I know, so that point is that even when I'm down, I know that day I'm doing that, and so I really have to focus on those days to limit distractions too, because I'm wanting anything to distract me from doing it. So a lot of times I'll be very much so. It's super important for me like to start my day off well. So my rhythm of my reading, my meditation, my prayer, all that is super important on those days, because that gets me started on the right foot. That's another thing I'll say, man, when you're in those low moments, man, like your morning routines matter. Like you can't make them random. You got to be a little bit more locked in. And so I try to work hard to do that.
Something I heard recently was the comparison between rituals and routines.
Yep.
I've been thinking about that a lot, because I've noticed that whenever things start to feel, I'm a rituals person.
Yep.
I'm like you, where ideally I would ride the wave. I'm generally like, just make sure you work out. Just make sure, you generally read, and I'll do it, because luckily I have the discipline to follow through. But when things start to feel out of control, I can tell how I start to tell myself that I need certain routines. I need X amount of sleep. I need to have this amount of time to do something. I need this kind of relief. Like when that's not true for me, whenever things are going well. So it's almost like I start to believe that I need more structure than I do, out of the desire to control what other thing I can't control. And so I've been thinking a lot about, what are the rituals that, despite the season that I'm in, whether that's changing by the day, whether it's changing by the month, whether it's by the year, what are the rituals that help me operate the best? So I'm thinking about that a lot. What would you say yours are?
I think certain things I'm trying to get better at, but rituals for me is like the trip I go with my friends. Like to me, that's incredibly important. Like that's a thing where I'm like, hey, every year we're picking somewhere, we're going. Because of what that time is like for me. I think other rituals like for me would be right now, I think just in the mornings, like reading, where I'm doing, I read the Bible and then I do like some leadership, right? And so like, that's a ritual for me. So it's like leadership, because a lot of stuff I do is kind of in that vein. So I kind of do that as well. I mean, that's kind of like, those are a couple of things for me that are actual rituals. I think the other thing too, for me is that I really like to try to, when it comes to like with my wife and my kids, I think one of the things we're starting to add to, because we've been so busy, is trying to do some level. I've actually liked this, but we don't do great at it, is like a family vacation. Because for so long we're just me and Wendy, because she's like, running a dance studio and doing that. She many times is like, it's when you're a small business owner, you're like always on. Like there's no one like, like, hey, who are you calling if like the fire is going? Like you're the one, you know what I mean? Like who are you calling for HR? You're HR, like, and it's like she's finally got herself to a place where she's built a successful business where she has a little bit more room. But for a long time, and we just were like just working, kids were dancing, Jalen was playing basketball. So it was so hard to find time to actually do like family vacations. And so last year we were able to do one, during like Labor Day. And it was incredible amounts of fun that we actually had. And so I think that's a ritual I actually want to start practicing more, because it actually was a lot of fun. And I actually, actually love to do it.
Yeah, I haven't done that since 2020.
Yeah, last year was the first time we did it since 2020. Yes, but it was a minute we were, we went to Destin in 2020, and then like, yeah, it was last year was the first time we had been back, because, like we were trying to both build business back up through COVID. And it's just, man, like the money you have to spend, the money you don't have, that's the other thing too. You got to be realistic. Like that's the other thing, understanding seasons too. This is one, financially. We were building things from the ground up. And until the last 2 or 3 years, like being able to actually like really start stashing money away, preparing for your future, whatever, it was just recently. And we've been working at this for, 15 some odd years, but you're just constantly. And so when I would invest more. So I would feel really bad. I'm like, man, I'm not preparing for my future. But you don't have this much in retirement. You have this much savings. I would feel so bad. I'm like, dude, I'm the worst, I'm whatever. And started realizing like, no, like, and I'll never get talked to a friend of mine, financial advisor. And he was like, I was like, man, I need to start putting this money away in this. And he's like, Adrian, he's like, your businesses are the thing that's going to make you money. Just keep you've been investing in them. Yeah. And, and now that I've done that, it's like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to see like the payoff of whatever for doing that. So it's like, it's even understanding that. I think so many times like people will say, well, you got to start doing this. You got to start doing this. Well, like you got to understand what season you're in. Like, you talk about it when you're in your 20s, man, I tell people, man, freaking like just work. Like stop trying to get like balance, just work. Because you're going to learn so much. And it's not going to always be that way. Because that's what everybody gets worried. This is one thing about seasons. We all start getting worried. It's the thing that freaks us out of why we try to manage tension is because we all think the current like season we're in, like we're going to build this habit that's never going to stop. So if you're in a working season where you're working 60, 70 hours, and you're like, and then you hear people, well, no, man, you can't do that because, man, if you're not, you're going to build these habits, and if you build these habits, whatever. You could, or you could just be in a season for the next 3 months or 6 months to where, yes, you are working your face off because it's what's in front of us. We've had those seasons, right? And I try to tell you guys, like, we're like, hey, we're about to enter this season. So for the next 3 or 4 months, guys, like, we're working. It's going to be like 60, 70, 80 hours. And then what do? Then we have like these breaks where it'll go like a month or 6, it'll go 2 months. We're like, we're still working, but it's kind of like it's rest time. Then it picks up again. I think you have to recognize those seasons and not be fearful that you're going to stay in that place the entire time. Just be in the moment and ride the wave and trust that you have enough intuition that if you get too far on one side or the other, you can work your way out of it. You know what I'm saying? I think, and then because I have to do that on the other side of seasons where sometimes I'm like, when I'm in a season where I need to, like, where I can just rest and chill out, I'm always like, okay, what's next? I got to be, and I like try to find something to go start doing, versus being like, no, just actually enjoy this time. You know what I mean? And so that I'm kind of more the opposite. It's always like trying to get me to actually like slow down is kind of the difference. But those seasons are incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I imagine the time when there's no children in your house, and when you're just like, so what are we gonna do with all this time?
Yeah, that is what's interesting. Like I said, the interesting thing, Jalen will actually be here, but again, it's going to a different. Like that's the thing. Like I'm in a different season now with him because, like, man, he is literally being launched out. So like it's no longer Jalen under my roof. I am still his father, but more than anything else, man, I am like coming alongside of him to like just be like his, his greatest, like I want him to choose me as a consultant. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like, man, like to be there to help him, and I'm there for him, like right alongside of him. That's the role that we're in now. But that's a different thing because, again, even some of Jalen, some of his issues he's had, it hasn't been that. And so me having to learn this season, it's really hard because you're like, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? Am I pushing too hard? Am I not doing this? Oh, that's not my responsibility. He has to take responsibility for this. But then also I'm like, but I still have to help him. You know, as a father, there's still parts of things where I have to kind of help guide him. And so that's an interesting season too. So I don't know, when all of them are gone, like, yeah, I just tell people, like, they're all gone. Like, it's going to, gives me, it's going to give Wendy and I more time together, but also it actually gives us more time to like even run after some other stuff, you know what I mean, that we've been able to do. One of my good friends said that. He's like, do well in the season that you're in with raising your kids. He's like, because if you do it right, and what he means by that, not like because no kids are perfect, but you're not dealing with crazy stuff. He was like, when you get into your 50s, he was like, you will be the most productive you've ever been because your children, he's like, because you're not worried about it. He's like, I can't tell you how many of his friends, because in the other seasons they didn't do that when they're in some of the greatest times of energy and wisdom, they can't do it because their kids are like literally, their kids are train wrecks. And so they're spending so much of their energy, creative energy, emotional energy, trying to help them get out of the place that they're in. And so that was always, well, he's like, so understand the season, and that was always helpful for me.
How do you know when you're in a different place? Because transitioning from seasons, I think, is really easy to miss.
Oh, yes. That's a great question. I don't know, honestly, if I've figured that out yet. Because I think it's like, here's what I would say. It's, you have to like look around. Start, I always say, read the data. What's going on? Are you in a season where all of a sudden, you're like, man, I feel like kind of everything I'm putting my hands to right now is kind of moving forward, right? So you may be in that season of a high wave professionally. You may be, we always say, you may be in a harvest, kind of that harvest time where you plant all these seeds. Now it's just time, you get to reap a lot of that. Sometimes, man, you have to look and see, man, if, I think reading the data, where are you at? How are you doing emotionally? How are your relationships? Are they tougher than what they normally are? Are you having trouble communicating, man, at work? Is it like, dude, I've been like, man, per project and I'm doing this and I feel like I'm just kind of stuck a little bit, or I'm kind of like in this season, or maybe you get a new, I think that's one. I think another thing is like in transition, maybe you get a new job. That could be a transition season. And so I think you got to be able to read the data. I think you also got to be able to know like then I think it's also important to have a scoreboard. What am I trying to accomplish right now? Because that helps you understand, because sometimes we're always trying to win. And what winning means is that you're having whatever level of success that looks like for you. Or what I mean is like, okay, that's money, that's influence, whatever. Versus like, man, you may be in a season winning for you. It's just literally showing up because you're in so much emotional pain. That's the win. The win is like, yo, dog, I every day I'm showing up. And if I show up, we ain't really talking about my performance right now, but if I show up, that's a win for me because it's so hard for me to get out of the bed. I mean, I have a friend like that where, man, he was struggling so much. And I was like, dude, this is all we're doing right now. If you get up every day and just show up, that like literally that is like we just hit the last second buzzer beater shot. And what happens is that he just kept doing it. And then over time, he just worked himself. But that was his win, because a lot of times when you are in those seasons, you think you expect more, you should be doing more, then you get hit with shame. And then that just pulls you back down to a worse place. So that's why I would tell you, all that being said, when you're in certain seasons, read the data. Also, have a scoreboard. What does it mean for you to win kind of in those seasons?
I'm feeling like existential. Think, I can be working for these things. Does it really matter? Or I'm working for, maybe I want to be a CEO, maybe I want to be whatever, but like, does it really matter? Like one day I'm going to be 60 and I'm going to be CEO, but I'm going to look at 20, 30, 40 and wish I had like spent more time with this person or spent more time.
Yeah.
Like, and then I can like talk myself into a circle of like, okay, well, let's just figure out like in the season what, like figure out your scoreboard or whatever, like what matters to you then.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I still know what my question is.
No, I think I got it. No. Yeah, that's a great question of like, because you can look back at your life and be like, great, I'm a CEO at 60, but like I said, and I think it's because what matters to you. Right. Because for some people, it doesn't mean, and this is where I think we all have to be okay, because especially in our country, it's like everyone goes to extremes and then everyone starts to like compare and everyone starts to think their thing is better. So for example, when someone says, oh man, like, you always hear this about family, right? Like, man, my family is, when you get to this point in your life, You're not going to be thinking about, man, the money you made. You're going to be thinking about your family. Like, I get that, but I think that's kind of a shallow thing not to go deeper than that, because honestly, you could have been creating tons of jobs for people who really got to enjoy their family. You could have been like, you think about somebody like Abraham Lincoln, who really couldn't enjoy his family, because I'm like, hey, he's trying to stop he's going through a war, and he's trying to end one of the most horrific things ever. And so you look at him, was he like this great family man? No, but was he pretty impactful? I would say so, yeah. I think you have to determine what matters to you. And then from there, that's how you measure it. Because for you, Lauren may be like, man, I don't really care about this being CEO. But like for me, it does matter to me, because why it matters to me is I believe there's meaningful work that I've been given. And I want to actually, I believe I need to be faithful to do that, because of I think just kind of purpose and calling and things like that. That does not mean I throw away friendships, relationships. None of that matters to me. It matters a ton to me, but this matters a ton to me. And I think what people tend to do is we've made it because of an overreaction to from Gen X was overreaction to boomers, to where their parents are working all the time and kind of just left us all at home, right? As latchkey kids, whatever. So now Gen X parents, like me, parents were the other freaking way. And it was like, man, we're at every event, we're at everything. And, and you're like, dude, the kids have no idea how to do anything, because we were at everything, because we're overcompensating from our parents. And then everyone's saying, well, you know what, since they didn't care about us and they didn't care about us family, we got to care more about family. It's like, no. It was different times, different seasons, different whatever. And and there's things you can learn, but we can't overreact and make one better, because what's going to happen is going to swing the other way. What's going to happen probably for my daughter's age is going to be like, man, family became this freaking center idol for people, and they're going to go back to freaking working and it's like, no, it's attention balance. And I'll end here. You got to know what it is for you, and it cannot be the comparison game, and you have to be okay with that. Because I think so many times we're so worried about, because when you even ask that question, Lauren, it's like, you think very deep personally, but then it's also a lot of that's probably man, well, what for you and for me, for all well, what are people going to think, because there's part of you, because you are talented, you're like, I don't want people think I'm not really a loser because I didn't really do nothing. And then on the other side of it, you're like, but I really care a ton about relationships. That's all that matters. At the end of the day, if that's what the scoreboard is for you, then measure off of your scoreboard and then be okay with that. Because the truth is my scoreboard is my scoreboard. My scoreboard is I want to launch 1 million authentic leaders into the world. So in that, I'm like, okay, how do I go do that? And what does that look like within my life? And 4 very important people in launching them into authentic leaders' life is my wife and my 3 children. So it's not outside of that, but it just looks different. And so I think you just got to does that make sense?
For someone who is more on the other side of I don't really care, do you think that that's the type of person who just hasn't found, obviously there's stuff somebody said about some people are going to care more about working type things, and some people are going to care more about interpersonal type things, but not talking about that part, is that someone who just hasn't really found something that they love? When I think about myself, there's a lot of things, I'm unwilling to settle for something maybe I could be an accountant and I'd be so miserable, but I could do it.
Yeah.
And I'm unwilling to settle for something like that.
Yeah.
But then I also everything I try, I'm this is still not quite
what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think some of it is in your in your 20s, you're trying to figure that stuff out, and that's a part of it. Because we've all been told man, find your purpose, find your call, do this, and you got to find it. And you guys, your generation, for you and Bri, you all are under all this pressure from people to find it in your 20s. You're why? You know what I mean? You got to try stuff and go do it. So I think part of what you're saying, you're still trying. I think the thing I would encourage you is to do the autopsy of the things that you actually do enjoy, or that, man, I like this. You may not love it, but that's oh, I kind of like doing this. But what about it? Because I think that's what you haven't found yet. You haven't found the underlying common thread. It's already there. It's already telling you. It's just you've been looking for a job that you're man, like you said, be an accountant, be in film, be, a missionary, be whatever those things are. And in that, you're looking for the job to do that versus looking for what are the threads and themes underneath that. What about film? What about, you love going and being, very much so in going overseas and traveling. What about that? What about new relationships? You know what I mean? That you get to meet people and you strike up conversations. What about that do you like? And see if there's connecting dots there. Because I think once you start connecting the dots, that's when you'll start finding passion. I think you're never gonna be somebody, I believe, that's gonna find one thing. Like you're never gonna be like, okay, hey, I'm gonna be this like film person for the rest of my life. I don't think so. I think you'll be someone who does like, you know, a lot of different things. Like I'm working with somebody right now and they've worked in so many different industries and worked for a lot of powerful people in, you know, entertainment. But the one thing is more and more I work with her, we're just getting to is that she really does. It's like authentic, like it's authenticity and people who are really authentic, she loves like telling their story and however that is. She just loves this, like she wants their story to be told because they're just genuine, they're pure, they're whatever. And it's like she just wants to tell their story. And that's kind of all those things. So she has worked in a lot of different things, but it comes from this place. And so we've been trying to find what are the threads. So when you're working for Miss Universe, what about that? So what about it? So she's, oh, is this part about it? It was always about like the people's stories. It was this person when they get to go up there and tell their story about this or whatever. So anyway, I think that's the thing for you is you got to start finding those common threads. And I think you'll start to really enjoy it. But don't try to, you know, it's like I always say, Phil Knight says, don't try to find a job, find a calling. Jobs change, callings don't. And I think that's what you're looking for right now. Well, go for it.
Well, I could list for you like 4 dream jobs. Like I would love to do these things. But each of these 4 things are like very difficult to attain or will take like 40 years to do. Mm-hmm. So how in that sense of like, okay, I don't really, it's hard to like find a purpose of like doing something now for 40 years from now. Yep. When like I'm here now, like who knows how that
So yeah, what I would tell you is then saying, okay, not just getting to that job, right? Now, let's say that's what you know, one of those 3 or 4 things you feel like, I really feel like I should do this. It's not about just getting there, but it's like, how do you need to be successful there, right? What I would do is say, okay, man, what are the attributes? What are the skill sets? What are the things that are needed to be really successful at a job? The reason why I say that, you know, listening to Will Smith's book, when him and his manager, you know, he had an opportunity to do some movie. I'll never forget that. I can't remember what movie. It was like some horror movie. And they were something like that. And they were going to pay him, you know, it was good money. You know, this is when he was kind of doing Fresh Prince, but like, man, they were going to pay him good money. And his friend's like, dude, this isn't for us. And then finally his friend came to him and they're doing a Fresh Prince. They're doing like, you know, he went from the rapper to this and he's doing like great stuff. His friend's like, man, what do you want? And he's like, what do you mean what I want? He's like, no, like what, like what do you want? And for the first time he said, man, I want to be the biggest movie star in the world. And his friend was like, okay. And so what they did, they literally started figuring out what are the attributes for being the best movie star in the world. So it was like, okay, they had like, it was one of those like blockbuster movies, you know, it was kind of like they always had, you know, there was some type of thing to it where there was like an opening. And so Will figured those things out. That's why almost every one of his movies had he didn't have the Tom Cruise effect to where they said Tom Cruise energy is crazy, where that dude was still on the red carpet signing autographs for hours. And it's just unreal. Will was like, man, I didn't have the Tom Cruise effect, whatever, but he had music. So that's why every time he did a movie, he dropped a song that went with it and made it global. So they started figuring out the point is like they figured out what it was going to take to become that, and they started doing it. He had to have the talent, but he also had to have the attributes to do that. For you, I think it's finding that as well. What are the things for you? Like, what does it take to be successful? Who's been successful at their job? What did they have? Are there common threads? What things do they do? And then I think starting to work your way backwards to now say, oh, let me start now working to get those things right now in this phase of life or something for 40 years that I may get. And here's the thing. Let's say you don't get that. I guarantee you those things that you learn are going to make you be successful in life, make you make an impact in life regardless. In job, friendships, relationships, you'll 100% do it. So that's what I would do. I would start honestly evaluating the people who've been successful there. What did they do? And then work your way backwards and then start finding yourself in there. And what you'll start to realize, you'll start finding yourself in positions and doing things that actually helps you build that out.
So what if you do those things and then 40 years from now you change your mind?
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think once you get there, because here's what you did. I guarantee you, if you have that type of dream or vision for something, it's probably pretty profound, and the skills that you need there are going to be 100% transferable. Because all of a sudden you start working, you're like, man, because you may start being on that journey. You're like, he's like, I got this journey here, but you're like, you go into side quest, and you're like, oh, you realize the side quest is the main show. You know what I'm saying? It's the main event, and you didn't realize that. I mean, for me, I had no idea. It was kind of like, I mean, to be honest with you, it's like I just wanted to make an impact. But I started going down this road. I came back to Tallahassee, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to start doing this basketball skill training thing. And I thought for me, I thought the basketball skill training and development deal was going to be, I got multiple ones of these, franchises everywhere. I was going to be on the front end of it. But what this was the beginning of a journey that what I didn't realize was that I was actually learning the process through basketball, like of who I was and how do you actually build an authentic person. Because I was doing basketball training. I'm like, oh man, I was literally developing people from the ground up. And it was like, man, I didn't have all these pros. I started with literally when our business took off, I said, I'm focusing on literally 8 to 13-year-olds. That's it. And there was a reason why, but man, in that, I started learning how to develop people, help them become aware. This is your skill set, this is your ability, this is what you're going to do. And man, and that was kind of the journey I was on of building. I think, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. But then the side quest, I was like, oh, this idea. But man, as I started going through this process, I'm like, I really more care about like helping people figure out like who they are. That's what made me come alive when I was training people. And I would have never known that. It's like I would train people, I'm like, oh, they got it. They're actually knowing who they are. They're not trying to be anything else than what they do really, really well. And I'm really good at getting them to do that, to be self-aware and then have resilience to remain self-aware. And then from there, it led to, a lot of stuff that we're doing now. Never in a million years did I think, oh man, like, hey, I'm going to be like doing like executive level coaching and with teams with people who are very, whatever. I thought it would be somebody maybe coaching me to do these things, but not me actually being the one. But I realized, man, some of this is just part of my story. It's not a coincidence. Like my great grandfather was a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor, my dad was a coach. So it's kind of like I'm living like the worlds of all that. And that's the other thing too. A lot of the DNA, a lot of your story in the past, it kind of like shapes you. So the way you have to do it, you just got to just keep walking. So the number one thing I would tell you, and this is, I'll be done, is like, what's in your hands? What's in front of you? I just believe that there's something about when you just do what's in front of you, it leads to the next thing. And it leads to the next thing, and it leads to the next thing, and it leads to the next thing. And I can tell you somebody that's really been my life has been that. It's just whatever's in front of me trying to do that. And times I've fought it. I've always wanted more down there, but I always come back to the next thing, and it's always led me down the road. And I think, man, and here's the other thing, like your journey is your journey, your timing is your timing. We all live in an instant world where everybody wants to be so fast with what they get. So everybody wants to be in my 20s, I'm whatever that thing is, I'm top profession. But when you really look at it, like I always say, okay, let's say you're that at 25. Like now what? Like that's still like the height of your life is at 25. That would suck. Because now you're like, oh, it's just a downhill. You know what I mean? Like it's like, okay, like where do I go from here? And I think that's where I've loved the fact that over years that I've just had to just build and just build and build and build, because I think it's helped me understand how to actually like help most people. Why I think I'm good is because I'm intuitive enough and I've learned through my own process. If I would have just blown up and like, man, I became like, at 25, like this, the greatest, like, executive coach and leader and develop, then like, what is that? How's that helping, somebody else? How does that help you or somebody else? I'm like, yeah, I just kind of like, man, walked outside and did it and great. And the people are like, okay, so what? Now I'm like, oh no, here's the process. So that's why I could talk to people, because most people, it's the process. You're going to go through this process. Can you embrace that process? Can you be in the moment? So I think that's kind of how you go through it. So look at that. Great questions, Lauren. Good job. Well, guys, hey, I hope today was actually helpful for you. And here's the deal. I don't know what season that you're in, but I want to encourage you not to be afraid of the season that you're in right now. A lot of times, unless it's one of those seasons where everything is up and to the right, we look forward to those seasons. If you feel like, man, I may be in a season where it's more of like, man, underground. Like, and you're not seeing a lot of success. A lot of people fear those seasons, and when they fear those seasons, they're always just trying to get out of that season versus embracing that season, being in that season. But that season won't last forever. And honestly, there's like one of my favorite like things in the book of Psalms is simply this. It says, man, it's like you find this person that they produce fruit in every season. The question when he's writing that, he's not talking about like he never says what type of fruit. He just says he produces fruit. Some fruit that you're going to produce, and some things you're going to do are going to be underground. They're not going to be for everyone to see. There are going to be some seasons where, man, you're producing fruit where everybody's going to be able to see, and everybody's going to be able to eat off of the stuff that you do. The key, though, is that making sure you're in whatever season you're in, you're producing the right type of fruit for the next season that you go in. But you have to be there in the moment. So, again, wherever you're at, man, try to find it. Don't try to find work-life balance. Understand the season that you're in and ride that wave, whatever season you're in. Until next time, keep riding the rules.